Welcome to Between Two Chairs, Demystifying Commercial Real Estate, the podcast that brings you the latest insights and trends on the South Florida commercial real estate market, with your hosts, Fernando Arencibia Jr. and Jennifer Woolman. In each episode, we dive into the world of commercial real estate and break down complex concepts to make them accessible for everyone. Whether you're a real estate professional, a curious investor, or just interested in the South Florida market in general, Between Two Chairs is the podcast for you. So pull up a chair and join us.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Between Two Chairs. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Fernando Arencibia, and with me, as always, is the very prepared Jennifer Woolman. Jennifer, say hi.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back.
Jennifer, I understand that we have a very special episode for us.
Woohoo! It's episode 50.
Ooh.
50. It sounds like a milestone, right?
It is. It's very exciting, and we just want to say for anyone listening and anyone who has shared their comments with us, we are very, very appreciative of that. And we're coming up on our 1-year anniversary, and we're certainly going to celebrate it with you all.
So all month we've been talking about small business, since March is Small Business Month, but it's also Women's History Month. So I thought it would be appropriate for our 50th anniversary to kind of bring those two together and talk a little bit about women-owned businesses, and more specifically, the Women's Real Estate Summit, which is put on by Beth Azor every year. And wow, it's one of my favorite conferences, and it's really more of a summit. She brings a group of women together who invest in commercial real estate. This was year number 4, and the networking and the amount of information that you get from women investing in real estate all over the country is just, it's phenomenal. Yeah. And so the reason...
So before you go on this, what I like about this episode is that I get to ask you a lot of questions, because I did not attend the conference, but I will start with this. So I get... I think Saturday morning, my wife tells me, I got a text from Jennifer about this conference for next year, that she bought me tickets to this conference for next year, and it was very exciting. And then I spoke to you and I told you, hey, Desi was very excited about this idea of going to this investment conference next year, and you told me I went a little crazy. I bought a lot of tickets for a lot of people. So my question to you is, what is it about that conference that got you so excited that you're already looking forward to it, a year later? That says a lot about the content and the experience of that conference.
So maybe if I give a little background about how this all started, it can help explain it. So, I've been in real estate for over 20 years. I've bought and sold my own home, and I've always wanted to invest in real estate because it's what I know. But when my husband and I finally had saved enough money to start investing in real estate, it was right before the great financial crisis. And we had put in some offers on single-family homes because we were going to have them for rentals. We really didn't have a ton of money saved, but we had enough for buying a single-family home that we could rent out. And every time we would get the deal, we would go under contract, and at the last minute, I would back out. I was petrified. Your brain has a way of playing games with you and talking you out of stuff that is completely irrational, but whatever. So I had already been doing this for a really long time. I'm a numbers person. I'm a data geek. You know that. I spend a ton of time doing stuff, but I also don't let analysis paralyze my action, right? So I knew that I had everything. I knew that I could get out if I found something wrong or whatever. And my brain kept saying, what are you doing? You're going to bankrupt your family, and you're all going to be living under a bridge. That was literally what was going through my head. So after, mind you, I've never put to this day, I've never had a client say, oh my God, this was the worst investment of my life. What did you talk me into? Never, but that's what was going through my head. So when it was me and my family and everything, the worst idea came out. And so I was talking to Beth, and Beth also is somebody who had been involved in real estate for a really long time. And she hadn't invested for a really long time, not so much out of fear, but more out of the money and everything else. So she had somebody who helped her break through that and get her investing. And I finally, I did that, phone a friend. I phoned a friend who I know that had the financial means to help if I ever got us into trouble. So I called him one day and I said, hey, I need to ask you a question and your answer has to be yes. And he's like, okay, what's the question? And I said, well, first, let me ask you some. Would I ever do anything to jeopardize you or your family? No. Would I ever do anything to embarrass you or your family? No. Would I ever ask you for anything that would put you in a negative situation? No. And so I asked him a couple more questions. And then at the end of the day, I said, so knowing all of that, if I ask you my question, can you answer yes? And he said yes, 100%, absolutely, no doubt. And I said, thank you very much. I hung up the phone and I bought my first property. But that was literally what got me through, was just knowing, even though he had no idea. He's like, wait, what's the question? I said, it doesn't matter. Just the fact that you said yes to that means that, and that was what it took to break. So Beth and I were chatting one day, and she said, and we started talking about fear. Everybody has fear,
So it's almost like they provided the net, like if you were a trapeze artist, just to know the net is there. I may never use it. I hope never to use it.
Right, but
I just want to know that somebody's going to catch me.
Living under a bridge, right?
Interesting.
Right. So, and at the end of the day, it was ridiculous. Like, even if everything went wrong, the only thing I was going to lose was either the house or the down payment or whatever. Like, totally irrational. So we started chatting about this, and Beth, being Beth and the educator, she's like, let's put on a conference for women. And so she does this whole thing. She lines up this conference, and not enough people signed up. So we cancel the conference, and then, sounds crazy, but COVID hit, and everybody was used to Zoom. So she started the conference that year on Zoom. It was free. She had great speakers lined up, and a ton of people came. And then the next year, so that was year one, year of the actual conference, right? It was really year two of the idea. And then she just kept going with it. And it's crazy because now I've invested with a woman in the group, and we'll get into that in a little bit. And women who had never invested but met during this conference got together, their group, to pool their money. So they created a women-owned business that now invests together in real estate, in commercial real estate, and they've invested with women in the group. So typical Beth, this thing is just snowballing. So it started out with mostly just commercial women, right? And now this year I took my daughter because I feel like we do need to be confident, and we do need to get that little boll weevil in our brain that tells us that we're not good enough or smart enough or responsible enough or whatever that thing is. And Beth had read something somewhere that out of all of the commercial real estate, only 3% of it is women owned. And not that they don't own with their husbands or something, but that women by themselves own. And if you think about it, a stat came out recently where most of the share of housing units are owned by single women. It's 14.5% versus single men at 10.1%. And to me, that kind of makes sense, because if you look at the National Association of Realtors, some 60+% of realtors are women. So in commercial real estate, there aren't as many women in commercial. I think it's like 30%. So Beth's goal is to get more women, especially those that are in the commercial real estate field, that know commercial real estate, that lease up commercial real estate, that sell investment real estate, to invest on their own.
Right.
And, some of it is, oh, well, I don't have enough money to buy a $10 million retail center. Well, guess what? You don't need $10 million. Right. You do syndications, you do joint ventures, there's all sorts of creative stuff. So that's what this conference is about. And she gets women speaking from all over the country. So the reason I went crazy is because I know so many women who are, have young kids, and what does their financial stability look like? My daughter, who right now, just because housing is so expensive, she has a great job. She makes great money, but she can't buy her first home. So what does that look like? Well, maybe your first home is really your first investment property that you live in for a while. So if you change your mindset and you start thinking, this isn't a home, this is my investment property, I'm going to live in it for a little bit until whatever my situation changes, or until I get moved to, transferred to another state or whatever. So then I started thinking of all these people, and I went crazy. Yeah, my credit card bill is kind of going, yikes, but it's all good. It's amazing.
That's an interesting stat about 3% of women investing in commercial real estate, because, we do have some very powerful women in our market that are always highlighted as great investors, great developers. Afra Jane, Lisette Calderon. But at the end of the day, you're right. The bulk of the investment is really centered on men. And it'll be interesting to see how the efforts of Beth Azer and yourself and everybody who's involved in that group, how that starts to move those statistics, forward. I know this was a 2-day conference. Can you tell us a little bit about how the conference is structured? Is there a lot of time for networking and communication and connecting? And how is the conference curated?
So there's the regular entry level, and then there's the VIP level, right? So obviously different price points. In the VIP level, there's a little bit more one-on-one networking, and that usually happens with a cocktail or dinner and welcome reception the night before the conference. And then on the second day, you have a separate breakfast where just the guest speakers and the VIPs get together for breakfast. But the rest of the conference is, breakfast in the morning, totally open, networking. Then it's content. Beth is a content believer. She believes there's a ton of other spaces and lots of opportunities for networking elsewhere. This is really about giving you the tools to do it. So you do have a couple of areas. Then you have lunch where you can network a little bit before the speaker comes up. So they do have like 1 or 2 networking breaks, but you're really networking throughout the day, right? The other thing that is super, super cool about it is all of the sponsors are her personal people that she uses. So it's her zoning attorney, her contract attorney, her investment person, her tax person, the tools she uses, the insurance company she uses. So that's amazing, because now basically you can build your team with somebody instead of having to call. If you already have your own team, awesome. But if you're investing for the first time, which most of these women have never invested before, you kind of have a team that has a track record and has somebody who's very well respected in the industry backing and vouching for them. So you're not having to go and call a bunch of people and do all of your due diligence for each individual member of your team, as well as for the property. So a lot of time is given for you to go work with the sponsors and everything else. So the first day is all presentations and women getting on stage and talking about what they do and how they do it. And then you have a guest speaker at lunch who usually has done something amazing. This year it was a woman who was a doctor and worked in the medical field, and now she owns a ton of multifamily. And then at the end of the day, you get into breakout groups. So you get to take all of the speakers you saw that day, and there's 2 30-minute to 45-minute I think it was 45-minute breakout groups where the women tell you what they're investing in, why they invest in it, what they look for, etc. And I'll give you some takeaways a little bit later, but that's kind of how it's set up. The first day. The second day is the private breakfast for the VIPs, the regular breakfast for everybody else, network. Then you you have a couple more presenters from the day before, and you do another breakout session. And you have 2 more times for breakouts. Then at noon, you get on buses and you go to, this year it was Beth's Retail Properties, which it was the first year as well. And she walks you through why that retail space, every aspect of the deal, how she found it, how she did the due diligence on it. She shows you her whole syndication stack, nuts to bolts.
Right.
And then this year, one of the women who's been, and one of my partners now, because I invested in one of her multifamilies, Natasha Falcone, she did a tour of all of her multifamilies and how she did it. And she started out on her own, just she and her husband. Then they wanted bigger properties. And she credits Beth because when she came to speak, I think it was 2 years ago, it might have been last year. No, I think it was 2 years ago. She came to speak and Beth said, okay, so at the end of the year, how many properties are you going to have? And she said, I don't know, maybe 30. And Beth's like, that's way too low. 100. So she said 100 and she's at 108. Wow. And she's had a lot of the women from that group invest in her group. So super, super cool. Then they did a tour of her properties and it was the same thing. This is why I like this property. This is why I like this area. Kind of what you did with Nate, right? When you went through Little Havana. Yeah. So anyway, so that's the conference. And then you do, you do a survey and she really takes it to heart and she listens to the feedback. Right. And so the first year it was all commercial. Now she's invited some people who invest in single family or townhouses or Airbnbs just because she's like, at the end of the day, that might be a stepping stone to get them into bigger properties and stuff that they can do on their own if they don't want to be in the syndication while they're figuring this out. So
tell us about your experience investing with this in this group. You told me this is an investment in multifamily, but up to now you had invested with your family and you own the entire thing. Now you're part of a syndication. So kind of break down what that looks like and did you have any concerns going in and how's it going and how do you like that experience?
Sure. I didn't know how to scale. And, when I first got into real estate a gazillion years ago, a girlfriend and I had all these visions. Like we drove around what is currently Edgewater, Wynwood, Midtown, and we're like, this real estate is amazing. We got to buy. But we didn't have the money. We were starting families. We had bought our own homes here. In her case, she was leaving a country and they were kind of starting new here. So we had some money, but not enough to buy in bulk these properties. Right. So we went to people that we knew who did have money, who did have the means, and they all thought we were crazy. Now, if you remember that area back in the late 80s, early 90s, It was rough. Talk about edge of scary. It was more like edge of petrifying. And my stepmother had been mugged and almost beaten to death down there. Like it was a hairy area. Exactly. Exactly. But it's 5 minutes from downtown Miami, on the waterfront, beautiful, old, totally run down, but old Spanish homes. Like it had everything that people with vision obviously had. But we couldn't figure out how to put it together. I knew nothing about syndication. I just knew that everybody that we told it to, when we took them down there and we ran the numbers and we talked about zoning, and they all thought we were nuts. Well, and my husband's like, what the heck are you doing driving in that area? You guys should not be in that area. You're crazy, whatever. So if I had known about syndication then, that would have been a whole different story. So when I finally got over my fear and jumped in, we bought a single family house because that's what we could afford. But single families are great investments, but two things. One, you're taking something out of the pool for a first-time buyer, usually, right? Mm-hmm. And more importantly, if you don't rent that house at the price that you want to get or you think you can get, or you don't rent that house at all, it's 100% vacant, right? Whereas if you can spread that across multiple units. Anyway, so once I met Beth's group and everything, we sold 2 properties that we had. I had been in an office syndication that I got into with some partners of mine back in right before I guess it was in the 2000s, right before the great financial crisis. We survived, we bought at the height of the market. Like it was a horrible time to buy, but it was a great office.
But since we aim to demystify commercial real estate. Give people a basic breakdown of what a syndication is.
So a syndication is somebody brings you the deal. So let me talk first about the office real quick, because that was the first syndication. Mm-hmm. So I had been telling my broker, like, how come you don't invest in real estate? Look at how much space we rent out the majority of this building. It's in a great location in South Miami. Like, you're paying a fortune in rent. Why haven't you ever bought it? Like, the people who own it are ready to retire. You can see by their business that they're just not into it. So anyway, he probably hated me for that because he ends up going through it. We put a group together, and so he becomes the general partner. He's the one who puts it together. He gets paid management fees and leasing fees and everything else.
He secures the lending.
He secures the loan.
Puts the deal
exactly.
together.
He puts everything together,
everything.
the paperwork, the agreements, the operating agreements, the contracts, etc. He negotiates the deal. And then he brings in LPs, limited partners, and it's based on a dollar amount, and it just depends on the deal. Back then, every share was like $10,000. So we went in with more than 10, but obviously not 50% or anything. And so we had a group of investors, and that's how it works. And then you get, depending on what your return's going to be, it's either monthly or biannually or quarterly or whatever they decide, or annually. And then at the end, you get a guaranteed payout. You get paid out. The investors get paid out before the general partner takes their money. And then there's usually some kind of incentive for them where if their return is above what they promised, they get an additional bonus, etc. So anyway, so we sell out of that. Not too long ago, I want to say maybe 4 years ago, we sold out of 2 single families that we had. And we took that money and we rolled it into multifamily. Why? Because now we can be part of a much bigger project in a different area, better returns, and more importantly for my husband and I, we weren't managing the properties anymore. The single families we were managing, the office we had a general partner managing, but the single families weren't close by, right? They were far away. Anyway, so we decided we had made really good money on the appreciation, and so we sold out to get into something bigger. And we rolled it into Natasha's. You know, she had a really good offering memorandum, otherwise known as an OM, put together. And one of the things that she actually discussed is all of the stuff that you should look for in an OM. So let me go over that a little bit. So the main 10 things that you want to focus on in the OM is the investment summary, which basically gives you an overview of the investment itself. And what you want to do is you want to make sure that that summary matches whatever your investment criteria is. So you just don't go in and start investing like crazy. You have to have some criteria as to the area or the asset class or the price or the return, something, right, to help guide you so that you're not running around all over and you have no way to balance and measure which investment's better than another based on your criteria. Then you want to know, what do you know about the sponsors, mainly the GP? Do you know anybody who's invested with them? Do you know anybody who's invested with them and would never invest with them again? What's their background? How many properties and syndications have they done? What do they own, etc.? Then understand the financial projections, understand the risk factors of the market, property, financial, and operational. Understand what the GP is investing in the property, the amount of money and what they need to repair if it's a value add, etc. The reporting, how often are they going to report to you on the status? And that's kind of like the payout. So some of it's quarterly, some of it's once halfway point and end of year. So when you should expect distributions. And she says, and I've heard this from other people too, if it says guaranteed distributions of X%, you run. That's basically it. So, and understand the subscription agreement and the limited partnership agreement. So if you get a capital call, that usually means that something came up that needs to be fixed. And now all of the investors need to add more money into the deal. Right. If you don't add more money into the deal, how much are your shares watered down, etc. So you need to know that because there can be capital calls. And then what is the exit strategy? Meaning, is it a value add and when they reach a certain percent they're going to sell? Or is it a 7-year hold, a 10-year hold? Is it getting to a certain cap rate? Whatever it is. So that's basically kind of syndication and what to look for in a nutshell. But it allows you to put in, to be a part of a much bigger deal with less money in and almost no work, right? I mean, you have to do your own due diligence, but at the end of the day, you're getting a check in the GPs.
How's the deal going?
So it's going really well. She was able to bump up the rents as she thought. We did run into a snag with because she only buys value add, so you're not getting any money the first part of the year, right? And she hit a snag with some waterproofing that she found that there was something that she'd never heard of, that I guess there were so many layers of coating that water had gotten stuck on one of the walkways in between. So, and she says it's painful because now it's way more than we budgeted for, but the project's taking care of it, no capital call, but guess what? Moving forward, that's going to be on our due diligence checklist, right? She's like, I'd never heard of this. I'd never seen that in any of the properties that I own. I haven't read about it anywhere. But it's going well. It's a great property in Hialeah. And
yeah, that's
I'm
awesome.
happy with it.
Were there any top 3 takeaways from the conference and all of the speakers?
My biggest key takeaway was from this one, from Laura Roethlisberger, and she invests in self-storage and how she manages the self-storage, and everything was very interesting. But my favorite quote from her was, take an expense in one business and make it a profitable business on its own. So with self-storage, she found that one of her biggest difficulties was getting dumpsters when she had to empty out storage units, when the tenants emptied out the storage units, and they're in short supply. So she started a dumpster business, and she goes, and I'm making so much money because there was such a need in my area for dumpsters. So I was like, brilliant. I loved that.
Yeah, need feeling.
Exactly. It was her own need, right? Yeah. So I loved that. And then Faria Ibrahim, she's a New Jersey broker. She was amazing. I just love what she does. And she does syndication a little bit differently. Ironically, the 2 takeaways that I got were both from what I would consider residential investors. One was from Nidhi Kaur, I think is how you pronounce her name, Kaur, and she's out of California, and she actually advises high net worth people, 30 million and above, family portfolios. That's what she does. And when California passed their ADU overall kind of blanket zoning, she went in, and basically in California, you can have up to 3 structures on a 5,000 square foot lot. So she went in and she found houses in neighborhoods that had high rental demand and not enough rentals. And she started buying homes and building ADUs. And I'm like, brilliant. And she rents them long term, not Airbnb. And so I thought that was brilliant and helps take care of a huge problem that we have, right? Most people want to live in a single family, but what we're building are multi-family density rentals, not what people want, right? Yeah. So I thought that was brilliant. And then another woman, oh my God, this woman made me cry. Her name is Therese Southwell, and she had an issue with an elderly aunt, and they couldn't find care for her, and the care that they did find for her was horrific. She found out that group homes are allowed in every single residential area of the country as long as, by right, as long as it's taking care of disabled individuals. So she said, look, elderly people that can live on their own or can live in assisted living facilities or whatever, great. But not everybody can do that, because if they are disabled, then it becomes a lot more expensive and everything else. So she bought a beautiful home that had 4 or 5 bedrooms, converted it into 8 because some of the bedrooms and the walk-in closets were huge. Every bedroom has its own bath, and she's in a very, very high net worth luxury. I mean, it would be like if she put this on Fisher Island or Coral Gables or like uber high, Gables by the Sea, Gables Estates place. And the neighbors went ballistic, and they were mean, and they almost bankrupted her, and they were saying horrible things about who was coming into the neighborhood, and they end up calling a newspaper. And the newspaper comes out, and they're like, here are all these uber wealthy people like dumping on a woman who's trying to take care of old people. So it kind of backfired on the naysayers, right, on the neighbors, and she was able to get it done. She's fully booked. She was booked because of that article. She was booked before she completed it. She has a huge waiting list. She shared pictures and stories of elderly people before when they were in the nursing homes or facilities versus now, and it was literally totally bedridden to up and walking and a human being again. Wow. And I don't know, it says something about the United States and how we deal with our elderly, but this was amazing. So she's investing in real estate, but with a social cause, and her business is really adult, end of life care. Right. So anyway, those to me were like amazing, and what an incredible group of women. So anyway, I know I've gone on long, but so next year, if you're a woman, you have any idea about wanting to invest, even an inkling, or you had an idea and you're like, oh, I'm never going to be able to afford it, please Google Beth Azor and Women's Investment Conference, or reach out to me and I'll be happy to put you in touch. It usually takes place in March, sometime around International Women's Day. And it's usually somewhere in Florida, but I'm not sure what it's going to look like next year. So.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, do you have a stat to share with us on to end the episode?
I do. So the top 5 MSAs with strong economies, a mix of industries, strong job market, etc., that has the most women-owned businesses is Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and West Palm Beach, followed by Dallas, Fort Worth, Boston, Cambridge, Los Angeles, and Phoenix. But Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Palm Beach, kudos to us for being the number one
MSA.
That's
awesome. I have here the top 5 South Florida women-owned businesses that are ranked by revenue in South Florida Business Journal, and that's RCC Association, $120 million valuation, Beverly Raphael Altman, and that's hospital construction, Cruise Planners, $60 million valuation, Michelle Fee, cruise vacation planner, Genesis Global Recruiting, Anna Church, $60 million valuation, Recruiting Staffing Workforce Solutions, you have Kent Security, $58 million valuation, Orly Alexander, principal, security provider, building services, business solutions, and Starmark, $25 million valuation, Peggy Nordine, full service marketing firm. So what I love about that is the wide variety of industries. It's amazing. Well, that is a great way to wrap up a celebration of women in the month of March and a celebration of small businesses. And this conference is a perfect place where both of those things merge very, very well together. Well, everybody, thank you for pulling up a chair and joining us today. Hope you enjoyed the episode, and we look forward to you pulling up a chair for future episodes, and we appreciate your listening in.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.